All right, welcome everybody to our June 28th, 2022 Eagle City Council meeting, starting at 5:30 p.m. We can get a roll call, please.
Here.
Here. Present.
Here.
All right, if everybody could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, does council have any additions, deletions, or modifications to the agenda? No, seeing none. Staff? City attorney? No? Okay. All right, item 5, recognition. So 5A is recognition of Lou Germano for his 6 years of service on the Design Review Board. He wasn't going to be able to be with us tonight, but we'll be giving him this really nice little eagle plaque and thanking him for his time on our Design Review Board. And we appreciate it whenever anyone joins our boards as a resident and puts the time and effort into making our community the great place that it is to live. So thank you very much, Lou. We appreciate it, and hopefully you can do some more stuff in the future for our community. All right, item 6, reports, mayor and council reports.
None at this time.
No. Councilmember Russell?
Mr. Mayor, I met again with the Senior Center last week, probably going to make it a weekly event, and had a discussion with the board president about a couple of things, and she's agreed to ask the board to implement a transportation policy so that they can add some policies regarding picking up of transportation clients, members, that will make it much more cost effective. And then in addition to that, we talked about including a policy. If they have a trip outside a 10-mile radius, they will charge a member $5. This would just be for their special trips. And then also a driver wage increase. They have 2 driver openings, and they're having a hard time filling those. And we discussed what an appropriate wage would be for that. So she's going to go before the board at this next meeting and propose those 2 things. And then additionally, I contacted the National Area Agency on Aging, and they got back to me today with a few grant opportunities that I will pass on to them as well.
No, excellent. All right, Councilman Bond?
First one is just kind of an update on kind of a project that we're working on with Steve Noyes' Snoqualmie, which is part of Legacy. We're coordinating, well, actually I'm coordinating with the HOA, the Irrigation District, and the adjacent development. We're going to develop a noxious weed control program for the riparian area, as well as a riparian management plan to address basically human safety, wetland functionality, wildlife habitat, and aesthetics. So it's nice where the city is working with a new development as well as an existing development. So I think that's working out really well. Next one is PPRC. One of the things we identified last week in the meeting, we identified a need for specifically foothills trail standards. Currently we have trail standards that are more designated for the city. In addition to those, they don't really address, but we need to address funding, management. Management, when we talk about management, is an application process, a review process, and a maintenance monitoring process, and a trail construction standards, basically using the existing development process and trail standards as a basis and moving forward. One thing we have in the foothills that's very different is we may have a lot of open space. Currently, the process when trails is part of a plat. We do not have a process in place right now for an area outside of a plat. So if we have open space, would we now require, if to build new trails, do we then have to go through the development process, which is costly, takes a lot of time, or can we develop a process in and of itself that somebody can bring in an application, there's a board that reviews it, they have to identify a funding process, a maintenance component, so all of that comes in with it. So we'd like to do that and then basically incorporate that into our existing, well, we have a draft ordinance right now and the additional resolution, and bring that back to council. Part of that, again, all of this is associated with kind of a foothills master plan or updating the foothills master plan. We met the equestrian group, we talked about that before. But one of the big things we're looking at is getting all of the user groups, input from those user groups as components to the trail master plan in the future. And that all was derived from the BLM concept plan. So the idea is kind of everything is coordinated with each other and as we move forward. So it's quick.
Excellent. Any questions? No? All right, excellent. Any staff questions? Nope. Reports? Attorney? Nothing? All right. We have our City Hall Department Supervisor report from the treasurer. Anybody have any questions on the treasurer's report? No? All right. Thank you, Kelly. All right. Item 7, public comment 1. This time is reserved for the public to address their elected officials regarding concerns or comments they would like to provide to the City Council regarding subjects not on the agenda. At times, the City Council may seek comments, opinions regarding specific city matters during this allotted time. This is not the time slot to give formal testimony on a public hearing matter, land use application, or comment on a pending application or proposal. Out of courtesy for all those who wish to speak, the City Council requests each speaker limit their comments to 3 minutes. Is there anybody who would like to give public comment? Yep. You can give your name and address for the record, please, sir.
Okay, sure. Tom Bringle, 2475 North Sun Valley Place here in Eagle. So I just brought a couple of questions that I wanted to pursue with you guys if I can. One is in the June 9th issue of Boise Devs, the Star Mayor, Trevor Chadwick, was talking about people moving into the area and putting a strain on their existing resources and infrastructure, and talked about a reduction in densities. He's quoted as saying, our roadways and our road networks aren't getting built at the speed that everybody wants. And then I noticed he said that they said back in 2020, when Chadwick was elected mayor, that the city did a 20% reduction in densities. And I'm wondering if that's something that we should address in Eagle, since we have many of the same problems that Star does with respect to infrastructure.
Okay.
Question, I listened to the presentation last week on the fiber project and wanted to confirm that cost / revenue projections are going to be included in the master plan when presented in addition to the deployment schedule, which I think was specifically mentioned. I wanted to ask if when discussing Spring Valley and the possible annexation of Avamore, the council has argued that it wants to have control over development in the area to preserve the uniqueness of Eagle. So I'm wondering if the council's engaged with the county in any of the discussions about event center development proposals that are happening in the foothills. And finally, just a general question about with the current uncertainties about inflation and supply chains, how is the city planning for potentially stagnant or declining revenues, significantly increased cost, and other things associated with the supply chain?
Okay. All right. Any questions for Mr. Bringle? No? Okay. All right. So, yes, there will be a financial thing done with the fiber. So there's that. The as far as with the county, working with them, we have in our comp plan already what we want to see up there with wineries and stuff. The problem is that they don't accept our comp plan right now because they still only have the 2004, I believe, that they're doing stuff with. So obviously until they accept ours, they can't implement things unless those folks decide to come into city limits. And of course, they are the ones that get to ask whether or not they want to come into city limits. We don't force anybody to do that. And I don't believe a lot of those properties right now touch anywhere in the city of Eagle, so they couldn't come to the city. The reduction that the mayor of Star is talking about, we are going through a comp plan amendment right now. That's how that kind of has to be done. I'm not sure how they're doing it. I know their process is a lot different in some senses because the fact that they don't have a planning and zoning commission, they don't have design review, the mayor and council just make all the decisions. So we are going through a comp plan amendment at this time. The review committee just got done, presented their stuff to the city, and now it will go on to having folks put all the information together to then have a new comp plan and get it out to the public for those that can come and comment on it and stuff like that. And then what else did I miss there?
Just planning against the uncertainties of inflation.
Oh, yeah, no, we are definitely. You know, that was one of the reasons that we really put together the capital improvement plan and the capital maintenance plan for the city of Eagle was to always think about those uncertainties. Obviously, a lot of the people that work here, and even myself, was really big involved with the city back in 2008, 9, 10, when all the downturn happened. And one of my things when I came in was to make sure that we could still provide the level of service to our residents that we weren't able to back then by doing these types of things. And really showing that, hey, we better be able to take care of what we have before we start building new. And so we put that out there, and we do have a plan to make sure that we can continue to provide the services to the residents of Eagle best as possible. So, yeah, definitely. Charlie's brain's working, so I'm just wanting to see if it's going to get to his mouth or not.
So, Mr. Mayor, I guess the only other thing I'd probably want to bring up specifically with the two is the density and infrastructure relative to Star. Just the I'd have to say Eagle is way out ahead relative to, the mayor brought up other different planning components, but just as our base, for all intents and purposes, Eagle is 1 unit per 2 acres, or actually flip like that. No, yeah.
1 per 1.5.
Yep.
Yeah.
As opposed to Star is considerably larger than that. So just we're starting positions and we're going to continue planning out. So I think one thing, Eagle's been doing that. Star is definitely having some growing pains. Eagle's gone through them, but I think hopefully they'll address that. Events relative to the foothills. We've been working with Ada County and specifically Ada County Parks and Pathways for quite a while to try to integrate them into our planning process. Because if we truly are going to look at a regional park, regional sports complex, regional parks, that regional component is if we can get additional help or not necessarily management, but additional funding and support from the county, that reduces our offset that we can put up there. So definitely working with them all the time on all those. So.
Okay, anybody else, public comment? Yes, sir. You can give your name and address for the record when you get to the microphone, please.
Steve Bender, 1235 North Seven Oaks Place in Eagle. Every time we approve a project or annex land, that proportion of units per acre changes. And we have a lot of undeveloped land that's not in the city yet. If it comes in as houses, that number will get tighter. If it comes in as open space, it'll get looser. So comparing Star to Eagle is a challenge to begin with. Certainly comparing Eagle to Meridian is a bigger challenge. Granted, development is one of the top 5 issues. I'm up here tonight about something that doesn't make the top 5, the top 10, perhaps not even the top 20. But having come home a month early from what was supposed to be a nationwide trip, I am having the opportunity to take my dog over to the dog park again. We shut down early this year the large dog side so that the grass could recover. And the week it opened up, it looked great. Now they've bricked in the gateway between the outer and inner gates where you can unhook, and that's doing okay. But just inside from the north end, it's down to hard packed dirt that's about the equivalent of the wall behind you. Much of the grass is already dying off, and it's still not doing well. I'm not sure what they've put in, but it doesn't seem to mesh with our environment and our weather patterns. And furthermore, some of the sod they put down last year has a netting that's now beginning to come loose and come up. And I've seen a couple of people, plus done it myself once, trip on some of that netting. When I was over there earlier this week, the stuff that's out and loose, I pulled out my knife and cut around the bench areas in the middle, cut some of that netting loose, and put it in the trash can, just so people wouldn't trip on it. I have complimented Public Works before when they've been over there on a Sunday and helped with problems, and they're doing as good a job as they can do, but they kind of got a bum deal in what they were given to maintain there. I don't know what the fix is. I know early on we thought grass was the better choice. Seeing how the grass we've put in is surviving, I have my doubts now. I'm not sure that Pebblestone it's certainly not cheap, and I'm not sure it's better, but it'll at least won't look quite as bad as the grass looks now. I'd hate to see us shut it down for another 3 or 4 months or 6 months or a year to let it recover, but we need something different in there to have a nice looking grass field, or at the very least, expand the rock areas away from where the mud forms from watering and rain, right around the central rock island in the park. It's a great resource. Everybody I talk to over there loves it. They're very appreciative of PetIQ funding 80% of it and the city going to all the effort that they went to get it put in. But we have got to remember that we'd like it to look like it's an Eagle Park and not a Meridian Park. And right now we're having trouble doing that. So any ideas that the council has on ways to improve that would be appreciated by the people that are over there every day using the dog park. Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, so we're working on that constantly. We opened it a lot quicker than we probably should have to get people there, and so it has taken quite a toll on it. We did the research with all the other parks around, Meridian, Nampa, all those. They said grass is by far. They had put in rock, they had put in bark, they had taken out grass, they put in AstroTurf. and grass was by far the easiest thing to take care of. So if it is getting that bad, then maybe we do need to just shut it down for 6 months, 8 months, and get it to where it should be and go forward from there. But if you look at the lower dog, the problem is it's getting so much use, it's unbelievable. And people coming from all over the valley, not just Eagle to use
Someone
it.
from Emmett
Yep.
last weekend.
And so,
I've got to say that it's a great resource. And I'm hoping my wife's not walking because we lived without it for years. If we have to close it for a longer time and make it right, that might be the better choice than limping along with a crappy park for the next 5 years.
Yep, we've been doing little bits at a time, learning from it, putting in the brick, like you said, from the entrance and so on and so forth, so.
And possibly, we're doing other surveys. Maybe put up signs there with a survey from the users, not the people that never go over there, but the people that actually use it every day and what they want.
Okay.
It's an option.
All right,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yep. Councilor Paul.
Just follow up on that one. Yeah, with the dog park so far, so there's something you call it, you can love something to death, which is what we're doing. In addition, I think we're up to 4, if not 5, if I can remember right. One of the things that, with a lot of developments that have been coming in specifically, is incorporation of a dog park into the development itself. That's going to be one of the best ways to take care of the park itself for long-term sustainability, is to have a lot more dog parks. So we can disperse the use, so it's not all in one place, loving something to death. As development comes in, at least from my perspective, we will continue to make that as a requirement for a lot of the new developments coming in, is they have to have a dog park within or in proximity or helping develop a new one. So long-term, we have dog parks spread throughout the city so we can use them, dispersed use will increase sustainability and all that stuff.
A lot of trails are used by dogs. Can we expand your trails fund to include funding dog parks?
All right, thank you.
We need more room.
Anybody else? No? All right, then we'll move on to the consent agenda. All consent agenda items are considered action items. Consent agenda items are considered to be routine and are acted on with one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless the mayor, a council member, member of city staff, or a citizen requests an item to be removed from the consent agenda for discussion. Items removed from the consent agenda will be placed on the regular agenda in a sequence determined by the city council. Any item on the consent agenda which contains written conditions of approval from the City of Eagles city staff, planning and zoning commission, or design review board shall be adopted as part of the city council's consent agenda approval motion unless specifically stated otherwise. Is there anybody who'd like to remove anything? No? All right. Is there a motion? Anybody in the audience would like to remove anything? No? Okay.
If there's nothing there, Mr. Mayor, I'll go ahead and move that we approve consent agenda items 8A through Q.
All right. There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any more discussion? Roll call?
Aye.
All right, we'll move on to item 9. All public hearing items are considered action items. Public hearings will not begin prior to 6 p.m. Public hearing are legally noticed hearings required by state law. The public may provide formal testimony regarding the application or issue before the city council. The testimony will become part of the hearing record for that application or matter. Public hearing testimony time limits. Individuals testifying are allowed 3 minutes for non-repetitive testimony. Disclosure of ex parte or conflict of interest from anybody? No? All right. Then we'll move on to item 9A, CU-05-22, waiver of lot coverage, Jared Borg.
Mr. Mayor, it's not 6
Oh,
o'clock.
it's not 6 o'clock, all right. We're going to take a 10-minute break.
Yeah, it's fine.
All right, welcome back, everybody. It's now 6 o'clock. So we'll move on to item 9A, CU-05-22, waiver of lot coverage, Jared Borg.
I'm right here.
All right, sir.
Kurt Barber. I'm representing Jared Borg. I'm the builder from Custom Steel Structures that is building this shop for him. And my address is 2437 East Chalice, Meridian.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so what this is, it's an accessory building to the house that was just completed. We had a neighborhood meeting on April 22nd. One couple showed up, and their main concern, well, their only concern, was that they weren't going to run a business out of this, and I assured him that they weren't. He has no interest in running a business out of this shop, and so that was that part of it. To move on with the PowerPoint, so the address is 1450 West Washam Road. That's the house that they just completed. Extremely nice house, and this shop will be every bit as nice. Jared did the PowerPoint at the planning and zoning meeting, and he said that he's let his wife build whatever she wanted, so now he got the shop. So we built a building on Fairview and 5 Mile area about a year and a half ago, and that's this building that you're looking at. And Jared loved this building, so we modeled it very similar to this one. So he pretty much went all out. The building itself is 60 by 90, so 5,400 square feet. He's an outdoor enthusiast. The shop is going to store whitewater boats and equipment, surf boat, motorcycles, snowmobiles, ATVs, vehicles, and RVs. And basically, the main reason that he wants the shop to be 60 by 90, which is a big shop, but he wants it because he doesn't want anything parked outside. He wants everything indoors. Not just for him, but for the neighbors, because they don't have to look at his stuff sitting out. So that's one of the main reasons that he wants it that size. He's using high quality materials. Southeast corner will have floor to ceiling storefront style windows, like you see on this picture. Glass doors and access to the garage doors on the east side. The one overhead door is complete, full on glass, and then the other one has a row of glass in it. He's putting a sport court on the side of the building, and then he's going to do a ton of landscaping, which they're actually working on right now, just to help out with the appearance of the building. The reason we're here is because city code allowed for 15% lot coverage in this area, in the area. 5,400 square foot shop puts the lot coverage at 16.3%. And that's what spurred on this whole process of, waiting for the planning and zoning to change some of or I forgot what it was, Mike, the one that we had to allow for consideration of a larger shop than the 15%. And we waited for that. And then, like I said, no, he doesn't want anything parked outside, and no commercial activity in the shop. So what's allowed right now for him is it says 60 by 70, but technically he can do a 60 by 71 foot shop. So what he did is compared the 60 by 90, it's the first picture with the yellow, that's the size of it that would be in proportion to the house and the property right now. And the one on the right is actually a 60 by 70 shop, which if this doesn't get approved, he'll have to do that, which he doesn't want to do. That's why we've been going through this process for quite some time now. So that just gives you an idea of what it'll look like in regards to, a 60 by 90 shop. He's got a shop, a neighbor, which is, you can see it just adjacent, and it's the exact same size shop that person has on their property right there. There's a lot of other shops in the area. Horse barns, detached garages, and everything. And what he did is went around with stars and located in a pretty small area of what is already out there. Some bigger, some smaller, but in relation to what he's trying to do as far as there's give or take 9 or 10 shops in the area right now that are close to that size. And then this was added on. I had an architect do this. The planning and zoning said they'd like to see what the shop's going to look like, so we had elevations done up. And again, they look exactly like the shop we did, or the commercial building that we did in Fairview, but it just gives you a better idea of the way the storefront's going to look. It's got an awning, windows. It's got the bronze color is they're panels, and they rust on purpose. It's the new thing. They look really cool, actually. What's that?
Patina?
Yeah, patina. There you go. They patina. But that's what the brown is, and along with the dark gray, and then the anodized aluminum storefront is going to make a pretty cool look. So that is what the new buildings are going to look like. And told my architect a month ago I needed these, and I told him so we were in no hurry, and that was my mistake because I just got these today, and I noticed that he did make one mistake, and there's no soffits on these buildings there's a soffit completely around this building. So that changes it significantly as far as when you look at it. It looks way nicer with the soffit, and the soffit will be on the building. It's just not on this elevation. So with that, that's what I have. Do you have any questions?
Any questions? No? Okay. None right now, it sounds like.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Mike Williams, Planning and Zoning staff. Tonight, the applicant's requesting conditional use permit to allow for a waiver of Title 8 in regard to lot coverage associated with the residential estate zoning designation. As Curtis covered, the maximum coverage within that residential estate zoning designation is 15%, and they're requesting a conditional use permit to waive that to be entitled to construct structures that will exceed that by about 1.3%. Morgan prepared these for me. I'm covering her applications tonight, and I'm looking for this vicinity map, and it's, oh, sorry. Thank you. It's actually, Morgan forgets that I'm colorblind, but it's this lot right here, and it blended in with the other lots. That's why when I first looked at it, I thought, where is it? But it's right here where the mouse is. And then what Kurt was pointing out, there's accessory structures around in close proximity to what they're proposing. Total acreage of the site's 1.9 acres. They're requesting a waiver to allow for lot coverage of 16.3%. That, as I mentioned earlier, can be facilitated or approved through the approval of a conditional use permit. Here's showing a general site layout. The accessory structure will be located behind the new existing home, completely behind with the garage. Their garage actually extends and covers half of the shop, which will be located. So a lot of this will be obstructed from street view based on the location of the new home. Kurt provided you with updated building elevations. And then this is in Title 8.2.4. This is where the maximum lot coverage is talked about, the maximum of 15%. All the structures that are being proposed are in conformance with Eagle City Code in regard to setbacks. One of the things when we're reviewing the application is the exterior design of the accessory structure will be compatible with the principal dwelling on the lot and shall not detract from the single-family appearance of the lot or obscure and confuse the front entrance of the principal structure. And this is found in Eagle City Code. So the finding, if you choose to approve the application, the finding you will need to make is the exterior design is compatible with the principal residence. I covered 8-7-3, that's one which talks about purposes and interpretation of conditional use, which allows for conditional use to be used for the waiver of the lot coverage here because it's found in Title 8. And then the general standards for conditional uses, C states will be designed, constructed, operated, and maintained to be harmonious and appropriate in appearance with the existing or intended character of the general vicinity, and that such use will not change the essential character of the same area. There are a lot of large homes within this area, and there are a lot of homes, as was previously shown to you, that do have accessory structures located within those lots. If they were to reduce it, they would have to reduce it down to a 60 by 70, then they could meet that. It is the applicant's desire to construct a larger shop so they can contain all of their items indoors and not have them outdoors, so it's in view of all the adjacent neighbors. The commission recommended approval unanimously with the conditions, site-specific condition number 3, and that's the one I want to cover, which will allow for the maximum lot coverage of 16.3%. And then the one thing I would ask if you choose to approve is to approve it with the elevations. If you approve with the elevations he showed you tonight, the elevation dated today, and require that soffits be added as well. So that way, if it's approved and it comes in, we can ensure that soffits are added to that structure. With that, staff would stand for questions.
Any questions for staff?
Mr. Mayor, go ahead and ask.
Councilman Pike?
Thanks. Mike, real quick, the size is 5,400 square feet, which is obviously larger than a normal house in the area, and a lot of large homes. And I'm glad that they mentioned that the size of the new dwelling was similar to some of the other ones on the street. My concern is still going to be, and the only one is I want to make sure that they've taken into consideration the fire load that's incorporated inside of their dwelling. It's going to probably require flammable fuels, oils, and other things. So it's just not a barn that's going in. But I know I saw the map as fire access, but my thing, again, is always going to be contingent with the safety of themselves and their building and the surrounding neighbors. But I want to make sure that they remember that there's no continuous water supply for firefighting operations in that whole area. So with the square footage of their home and then the huge building that they're attaching, it's not attached, it's detached, but two, that they just take in consideration, because we have nothing in the city code that can to fight it. But my concern is still the load, fire load that's within that building. It's different than probably the other buildings that are on that street, that they have some kind of a remediation plan, because they don't have any centralized water for continuous flow for hydrants or anything in that area. So I would just bring that up as a cautious comment of caution to that and to others that are building that same area.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Bond?
So this question for Councilman Pike. So when you talk about like remediation plan, like a Firewise type plan around the detached unit to reduce vegetation for limited?
Not necessarily the detached, because that comes in a conflagration from house to house if weeds are getting in there. It's more of how they separate their fuels and maybe have containers. I just want to remind people that, and I'm using them as the example, that you need to mitigate, and because it's a large building that's going to have a lot of powerized equipment and other things, motors and stuff like that. So I'm just basically giving a reminder that from the fire side of it to try to mitigate all that, because that will change the conditions of a fire in there. In the fact we don't have any water suppression outside of the tank waters on the engines and water tenders coming, we'll always be behind the eight ball fighting in a defensive mode more than as much as we want to be in a positive offensive mode.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for Mr. Williams? No? All right. We'll go ahead and open up the public hearing. Thank you, sir. Doesn't look like anybody signed up. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak? If you can give your name and address for the record, please, sir.
Steve Bender, 1235 North Seven Oaks Place in Eagle. I think it was 2 weeks ago, our church was here, maybe 4, to ask for a waiver on the same issue, coverage of the lot for our sanctuary. And as you guys know, I generally like our rules to be followed. And yet, when you're dealing with a developer coming in and wanting to change something for an entire subdivision versus a single owner, I'm a little bit more lenient. In this case, the larger garage area will actually make the area more attractive by having the units stored inside rather than parked outside. And I think for the neighbors in the area, that would be a positive. One other question that occurred to me as I was listening to the earlier presentation, I don't know the answer, and staff may, but when you're talking about lot coverage, are you looking from above straight down, or are you looking at the perimeter of the building on the ground? If you add soffits, you're going to add a little bit more square footage to the coverage because everything under the soffit outside the wall would potentially fall into that category. And I don't know if that's counted or not. I just would mention it so that if it is, you can maybe make the number a little bit higher so somebody doesn't come around afterwards and complain. In my own subdivision, I'm currently dealing with a couple of different homes where they're running a business out of their garage. It appears someone who's got a second unit built into their house and someone else who just put a swing set in their front yard because they don't have room in the back. And the other concern I have with the large garage, and it's not an objection to it, but they may sell this someday, and someone else may see that as a great place to run a business out of. And I don't know what they would be doing that would fall under our home-based business regulations for the city, but I don't know if that needs to be addressed, but it's just something I want to mention tonight. So if it does need to be addressed, you all can address that. But otherwise, I fully support their full-size garage that they'd like to put on. And I just want to make sure that everything's done so that that goes through approved. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? No? Okay. Mr. Williams, you want to address that real quick on the soffits just so that we can answer that question?
Mr. Chair, it was a long week last week, Mr. Mayor, members of the commission. I'll read you the definition of lot coverage. Lot coverage is the ratio of enclosed ground floor area of all buildings on a lot to the horizontally projected area of the lot expressed as a percentage. So the only thing when we calculate lot coverage is what is enclosed by four walls and the roof. So the soffits don't count, or any driveways, we don't count those, not even porches or patios, just what's enclosed by four walls.
Okay, thank you. All right, is anybody else that didn't sign up like to comment? No? Okay, then the applicant can rebut anything or say anything else?
The only, do I need to say my name again?
Yeah, if you could, please.
Kurt Barber, 2437 East Chalice Meridian. If we want to put, or if you want to put something in about fire extinguishers or something, he would totally do that. So, I mean, we can easily do that
Extinguishers
if that
won't
helps.
do it, Mr. Mayor.
Well, I'm just saying, I'm just trying to think of something that might help you.
Yeah, thanks, but, yeah.
Okay, any other questions for the applicant? No? All right, thanks, sir.
Thanks.
We'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Council, what's your pleasure?
Mr. Mayor, I go ahead and move that we approve 9A CU-05-22, the waiver for lot coverage from, in addition to, and Mike, it's number 3 you mentioned on the conditional use, or, and then also, I guess the soffits, if it's not, that's not a factor then, on the square footage, but it's, they're going to add those into the design anyhow.
And Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Pike, it's site-specific condition.
You said 3, but I don't know if it's 3-3 or 4-3 or.
3 just addresses the setbacks, and the maximum coverage was 16.3%. That's what the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended.
Okay, so we don't have to address that.
Correct.
The soffits are included, but they weren't in the design. So there's no issue because of the square footage definition?
Because of the lot coverage
Yeah.
definition, correct.
Okay, yeah.
But you did want something said
Yeah,
to the
sign.
fact of the soffits will be part of the,
Staff would recommend that you add a site-specific condition number 5, that the elevations shown during the meeting, and we'll date those tonight's date of 6/28/22, are approved with an addition of soffits to the roof.
All right, Mr. Mayor, then I'll include site-specific condition number 5 for the soffits as stated by staff.
okay? There's a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Any more discussion?
Did we get in the exhibits using today's date? Elevation?
as
As elevation.
Okay, next question.
staff? Okay. All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. All right, item 9B, A-12-21/RZ-18-21 and PP-19-21 Farmstead Landing subdivision. Mr. Jorgensen?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is Dave Jorgensen, address 14254 West Battenberg Drive, Boise, and here representing the Farmstead Landing subdivision, part of the development team, and really pleased to be with you tonight. I want to, first of all, before we get too far into the presentation, do quick introductions. Several members of our team are here in case there's questions I'm not able to answer, and also introduce some other team members. So first of all, there's Dave Little and Scott Smith, both with Williams Homes, builder developer of this community. Lauren Uxel with Kittleson is with us, as well as Dave Bailey, and not sure who else is with Dave, but that's Dave Bailey for Bailey Engineering, who is with us tonight also. And we just appreciate the opportunity to be in front of you tonight. Go through the presentation. I'll cover the following items. First of all, I'll introduce the site, talk about application details. Issues or concerns have been discussed through this process, and talk about the staff report, the development agreement, and conditions of approval. So first of all, introduction of the site. The site is just over 80 acres in size. It's in the city's area of impact, and it's located on the north side of Floating Feather between Linder Road and Park Lane. It's actually surrounded on three sides by three arterial primary roads of Linder, Floating Feather, and Park Lane. And it also has development on the north side, so it really is surrounded by development on nearly all four sides of the development. And so this is considered infill within the city of Eagle. The comprehensive plan identifies this property as neighborhood, residential, and transitional area, and I'll talk about that later. And there are three main access points into the development with our design. The main entrance be Floating Feather, another entrance on Park Lane, and there's Stubb Street on the northwest area that's a stub from the Bella Terra subdivision as required to connect into this development. The road is called Livorno. So we have two applications, again, annexation zoning with the development agreement and a preliminary plat. We'll talk about annexation first. We are requesting an R2 DA for development agreement residential zone. The development agreement will help put limits and constraints on the property to ensure that with the approval, it's built per the approved conditions of approval. It gives confidence to the city, to the developer, and also the surrounding neighbors to make sure it's built as approved. There are several items listed in the staff report as well as in our narrative justifications for the R2 zone. It's compatible with surrounding areas, but let me just point to one key area, and that's the comprehensive plan, the future land use map. This red arrow points to the area of identified. If you can zoom in kind of close, the letter F in Floating Feather is actually the property that we're looking at here. And again, it's identified as neighborhood residential. But there's also some hashed areas transition. Transition means develop it with less than 2 dwelling units per acre. And so we're doing that. We comply with the city's comprehensive plan and the future land use map of the R2 residential zone, which is an allowed zone for this area. We are requesting less density than the maximum allowed, and we're compatible with the densities to the surrounding areas. In fact, there's R3 to the west, R2 DA to the north, and other surrounding areas. So specific details to the application. We are requesting 140 total residential units. That is 1.74 dwelling units per acre. That's, again, less than the 2 dwelling units per acre as identified in the comp plan transition area. And these are all single-family detached homes. They'll be developed in 3 phases. We'll start on the south area off of Floating Feather for the main entrance, and we'll develop to the north and west from there. I really like the design that the team has come up with. It's a well-thought-out design where we have to have the connection to the north, but we don't have just a straight raceway shot through there. It's kind of a circuitous route for traffic calming, so it does not encourage high-speed traffic in and out of the adjacent neighborhood. We're clustering the units. We actually are choosing to do smaller lots with a greater and offsetting amount of open space to the development. And so there's substantial open space in this community as allowed within the PUD ordinance. There's greater amounts of open space and, again, many quality amenities. And I'll touch on several of those this time. There's over 22 acres of open space in this development, approximately 30% of the total site. There's a community pool, there's tot lot, there's pickleball courts, 2 large lakes, both active and passive uses within them, park and picnic areas, barbecue pit, gazebo gathering areas, and substantial pedestrian-friendly walking paths and sidewalks and street trees throughout the community. I'll touch on the ponds here briefly. I know we're always worried about water conservation, water in the area, and this site's a unique site where it actually has 2 water rights, surface water right and a well subsurface water right. We'll be using the irrigation water. We've filtered and dumped into the ponds for aesthetic purposes primarily, but we'll use a well just for supplemental purposes for evaporation purposes only. Here's a little closer zoom in of the community. If you drive into the main entrance again off Floating Feather and you turn off to the right, that's where the swimming pool and changing rooms will be. Off to the left are the pickleball courts and other tot lot gathering areas. To the north will be the gazebo and some barbecue areas. The pond in the upper left area, and I'll kind of follow my cursor here if you can follow along. This is a new concept I think is really pretty cool. It's a land bridge, and so as you're walking through, there'll be a large lake on both sides, but a real calm, serene setting where you're walking through to have the lake feel on both sides of you as you're walking north and south from there. I think that's a pretty cool little new concept I hadn't seen before. Here's some concept sample homes. These are new renderings, first time brought to the community. Again, all single-family detached homes. A variety of homes, as you can see, there's a 2-car, 3-car garage, single-story, 2-story RV bays and knots. And so there's a lot of variety to the homes that will be brought to the community. Modern farm design is what we're proposing to doing here. Kind of an upscale craftsman type style, which is very popular and very well received by the surrounding community. We had a neighborhood meeting beforehand, before the application was submitted, and we had quite a bit of discussion. There's comments of both support, opposition, and neutral. We listened to their comments, made adjustments where we could. Many liked the overall design of the subdivision, the amenities, the open space, the pathways, the proposed modern farmhouse design of the homes. Some of the questions or concerns raised include traffic, transition to the north, the homes, amenities, and the fencing. Now, I've touched on a couple of those, but let me just hit the rest of those here. Traffic, as we know, is often the number one concern for all communities that we build in the valley today. As I mentioned, the main access is on Floating Feather and Park Lane. We requested access on Linda Road, and ACHD denied that access. The number one reason is that there's a future expansion of Linda Road, a future roundabout at the intersection of Floating Feather and Linder, and there are separation requirements because of the high volume of Linder traffic and how close to the north that nearest intersection could be. Move it too far north, and now we're in compete with the existing Bellaterra access, and so we're not allowed to have access on Linder, which means, again, Floating Feather will be our main entrance to the community. The access to the north is required, but again, it's primarily there for neighborhood connectivity. We don't see people going north to go south. They'll come north into our development, and maybe they'll cut through our development to get to the Bellaterra, but we don't see that as a primary access to go north to go south into ours. When the traffic impact study was done, updated traffic counts were gathered, as well as recent traffic counts to make sure it's a complete and recent traffic study. One neighbor did request, they live on the south side of Floating Feather, if we could move the location of the access, and we looked at that and decided that there's no benefit by doing that. In fact, it might make it a little bit worse with traffic flows in the area, and so we're keeping the access where it is. With all that, we did look at other mitigation for the development. We are paying impact fees as required by ACHD to help implement their capital improvements plan. We are widening portions of Linder, Floating Feather, and Park Lane all along our frontages per the ACHD staff report. Adding sidewalk on Park Lane and adding a 10-foot wide multi-use pathway on Linder and Floating Feather, all of which will help with safer routes for bikes and pedestrians in the area. So we reduced the density a little bit from what's the maximum allowed, and so with all those things, mitigation has been implemented to this development. Those are all conditions of approval within ACHD staff report, and we agree with all of the ACHD staff report. Transition to the existing neighborhoods. That's one thing that was also discussed. There's clustering of homes. We have some different size lots on the northwest and the northeast. We have larger lots to the northeast area. And again, as we mentioned, we're clustering homes within the development to increase the amount of open space, but specifically at lots on the north border, we're matching the same number of lots along the whole north side. And so we have a little bit larger lots on the northeast side, but on the northwest, we're trying to match lot line to lot line. Where you have pie-shaped lots, it doesn't quite work that way, but it's still pretty close to an equal number of lots on the north border. There was a discussion about adding a common area pathway on the north border at the Planning and Zoning Commission especially, and there were mixed opinions to that. Some neighbors were supportive of that and others were very opposed to that. There was not common consensus, and there were specific concerns related to having noisy dogs or disturbing neighbors in your backyard when that's not what I bought into, for example. What we did agree to do, though, is, and we're committed to the neighbors who are here today, and if you're not here, we're committed to all the neighbors the same, is we will added upgraded landscaping in the backyard of all the lots in our homes that back up to the north border. So it adds that additional landscape buffer. It's not in a common lot, but it'll be additional landscaping. And some of the residents have even come to us tonight and asked, can you make sure those are conifers, pine trees? And we said, yes, we'll work with each neighbor to help with that too. Hard to codify that. We had that discussion at Planning and Zoning Commission. I'll let staff address that. But having that codified is a little bit harder than the development agreement for enforcement's perspective, but we've made that commitment and we're sticking to that commitment for the residents. Last item is fencing. So some of the homes on the north border have a fence and some do not. There's a little bit of confusion about what our plan is. Our plan is, I'll try to make it really clear. First of all, along our perimeter on the east, south, and west, along the main arterial roads, we have a solid fence there for the along the back of the landscape berms. And open style fencing within the interior part of the development along the common areas. On the north border, if there's an existing fence, we're not putting a fence against theirs. We're not putting fence against fence. But if there's no fence, our plan is to install a fence like the one next door. So for example, the whole northwestern area is all open wrought iron style fence. So our plan is to put open wrought iron fence where the fences do not exist there. So there's a continuous wrought iron fence through that whole area. When you get to the northeastern area, there's some open white vinyl rail style fence, and that's also where our larger estate style lots are. So if there's no fence there, we'll be doing a different style. It's the open rail vinyl fence as they're doing to match. So we're not putting fence against fence, but we are maybe patching in fence where it does not exist, so it's a continuous fence all the way through. And one last little bit of feedback that came in. Last week I received a call from the president of the Belterra HOA. He asked if we would consider adding some detail to the heavy truck traffic management plan. And specifically, you mentioned, can we add some signage on Linder so that since there's not an access on Linder, we tell our trucks to go down Floating Feather, and that's part of our truck management plan, and the answer is yes. Would we defer taking down the barricade that's at that connection street to Belterra as long as possible? And lastly, would we make sure our trucks all use the Floating Feather as their main entrance? Well, we agree to those things, except we just want to make sure it's clear that when we tie in the water line utilities to the Belterra line, which I'm sure the water company is going to make us do a loop system, the barricade is going to be in the way. So it's going to have to be removed temporarily during that construction. We'll connect the pipe and then we'll put the barricade back in. But once the street's paved, ACHD will not allow us to leave the barricade up. That's a public street. It'll have to stay open. So with those just setting expectations clear, we'll do all that we can to leave the barricade up as long as possible with that understanding. Last part of my presentation is on the development agreement. We asked for these three conditions added, which was discussed at the Planning and Zoning Commission. Setbacks for homes, private streets for the two cul-de-sacs, and easement reduction around the ponds. These are in your staff report. We asked for these. They were discussed by Planning and Zoning Commission, all approved. For point of very clear clarification, the front setback is measured in two different ways. The property line is not the same as the sidewalk. And so to make sure there's adequate separation, we have a 25-foot setback from the back of sidewalk to the front of the home. That's a requirement in code. We've stated it here. But the property line also is out in front of the sidewalk, and so we're complying with both sides on the front setbacks. Private streets, there's two small cul-de-sacs. This is allowed in code, but we just made it clear within the development agreement that it's allowed to have these as private streets. It has been approved by the fire department. Easement around the ponds, there's a requirement. It's kind of a standard ask more than a requirement from the city engineer for maintenance of the ponds to make sure you have a 30-foot easement around them. Our ask is that they reduce down to 12 feet, and the two reasons for that is these ponds are not primarily used for irrigation storage, but rather we also have multiple access points to these ponds. They're not tucked away in a corner to get to. So with all that, this Planning and Zoning Commission and staff had also concurred at the P&Z Commission to allow for that. So with that, the Planning and Zoning Commission did recommend approval of conditions to our changes with the development agreement of the setbacks for the homes as requested, the private streets for the 2 small cul-de-sacs, and the easement reduction around the ponds. In conclusion, I want to just say thank you for the opportunity to be with you tonight. I'm really excited to be part of this development. This is going to be a nice community. There are a lot of nice amenities, a lot of nice quality open space additions. It'll be a well landscaped around the perimeter. It'll be a nice statement to the city, which I'm a part of. And so with that, I request your approval tonight and stand for any questions.
Any questions for the applicant at this point? Councilman Pike?
Mr. Mayor, thanks. Dave, thank you for your presentation. I want to go back to, of course, the fire department real quick on the private cul-de-sacs and the private gates. I know we allow those. The question is, the water company policy, have you had the discussion with them on the HOA as to who maintains the hydrants and how HOA is going to acquire and maintain the maintenance and the records for those hydrants on a private street? What discussions have you had, and how did you work with coming up with mitigating for the HOA to participate in that?
Mr. Mayor and Councilmember Pike, let me just show you on the map where the 2 cul-de-sacs are here. So this is one of them, and this is the other.
All right.
So just for very clear, this is the area, kind of a nice little estate setting for those there. My experience, Councilmember Pike, is that the fire hydrants will still be maintained by the fire company. I'm sorry, by the water company. If I'm wrong in that, we'll make. I do know it's important that the HOA will have documented in the CCNRs and a financial budget to make sure that the dues are set such that that's considered. Now, let me just make one more statement. Typically, and this is what I think we'll be doing here as well, is you have a second association, a sub-association for these residents right in here. I'll visit with our team here, and I'll come back during rebuttal if I'm wrong. But my experience is usually these residents are responsible for the maintenance of those private streets, not the entire subdivision, because they're not the ones who are living there, in essence. And so there'll be a separate sub-association, which will have a separate set of dues charged for those residents to make sure that's covered.
And Mr. Mayor, if I may, let me read the paragraph so you guys, when you discuss, you can have it, but I don't want to get it
Please,
wrong.
and thank you, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, based on Suez Water, which has been purchased by another company, policy, any fire hydrant located on a private street becomes the responsibility of the HOA for repair, annual inspection, and maintenance. The HOA will have to contract with the water company approved contractor for those services. The HOA will also have to forward all maintenance and inspection records to the fire department annually. So just so there's clarity on that, I want to make sure, and that's not just for your development, for all with private streets and cul-de-sacs.
Mr. Mayor and Councilmember Pike, I'll visit with our team on that, but I would view that as just one line item on the budget, Brad. I mean, you have asphalt, you want to make sure the streets are constant repair, not 5 years, but 20 and 40 years from now. The street still needs to look good.
Well, the street does, but it's the hydrant, the maintenance of it, make sure there's water flowing out of it and they're respected and the valve works properly and the couplings are all adequately repaired. I mean, you got to keep it up. You got to have that 36-inch clearance around.
Yeah, I would agree with all that. Stormwater's a part of it, on the streets, so all those things are of concern.
Okay.
And that would be one line item of the line items on the budget to make sure that the fire hydrants are taken care of.
And like you said, though, the private increase of HOA fees will probably be those people's responsibility.
That's correct.
In that cul-de-sac area.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we agree with that. And I'll verify and come back during rebuttal, but I'm sure that's the way it'll be done.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Bond?
Mr. Jorgensen. Actually, two. First one you mentioned relative to the ponds, active and passive. So I'm going to go on a limb and assume the one on the east side is going to be your active. So float tubes, swimming, what all would be allowed?
Paddleboard.
Okay, so it's not just, we're not talking a fishing pond, we're talking so active use.
I'll give you a longer list when I come back during rebuttal if you need it, but that's correct.
Actually, that's going to go into, so one thing we talked about earlier, dog parks, and I always bring those up. One that may actually go well with the design you guys already have, which is excellent design, open space, relative to, because there's going to be active use of that one, that eastern pond, more than likely you'll already have all of those backyard fences will be fenced off. You almost create kind of a quasi dog park using that park adjacent to the water. That's another a water feature on a dog park. We don't have those very often. Optimus Fields is one of those. You can significantly shrink your dog park as long as you have access to water. So if there's any way that could be incorporated into the design a little bit, I think that would help out a lot.
Mr. Mayor and Councilmember Bond, I appreciate that input. I'll take it back to the design team. I do know that when you have dogs, you have to have doggy bags as well, and those have already been planned for in the community too.
Okay, perfect. Mr. Mayor, one more. So CEP, got to bring it up. That'll be the norm. You can discuss it with that or a basically mitigation plan for offsetting loss of open space and ag lands. So,
Mr. Mayor and Councilmember Bond, we've already had that discussion as a team, and we would agree to that
Okay.
condition.
Thanks.
Thanks.
All right, any other questions at this time? No? All right, then we'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Or we'll hear from staff.
I'm with you, Mr. Mayor. Fortunately for me, once again, Morgan was the one who carried this application originally through, but I was able to sit through several of the pre-application meetings as we carried this through, and then also conferred with Morgan during processing of the application. So tonight you have a request for you for an annexation rezone as well as a preliminary plat. And you look at the size of this plat and you think, wait a minute, it's over 50 lots. It should be a planned unit development. In this case, what we're doing is utilizing the development agreement in lieu of the planned unit development, and that is now permitted pursuant to Eagle City Code. The development consists of 169 lots, 140 of which are buildable with 29 common lots. Here's a vicinity map showing the area. It is located, as Dave described, between Linder and Park, north of Floating Feather Road. Consists of a little bit over 80 acres. The preliminary plat, as shown, I'm not going to go into great detail here due to the fact that Dave's walked you through the plat itself. And then this is the preliminary plat, and the state's in PUD, but remember, we're utilizing that development agreement in lieu of the PUD. This is the eastern portion, and this is, that was the western portion. This is the eastern portion. And if you notice, the lots adjacent to the northern property line, where the larger lots are to the north here, they have larger lots to provide a transition, as well as on the western portion, they have the smaller lots with mostly lines in alignment with the Bella Terrace subdivision to provide a transition to the adjacent subdivision to the north. The comprehensive plan designates this area as neighborhood residential, which allows for between 2 and 4 dwelling units per acre. They're asking for a rezone to R2-DA, I'm so used to saying planned unit development because of the size. But in this case, what they're proposing is actually less than the neighborhood, what's allowed permitted neighborhood residential densities, but it is in conformance with the comprehensive plan because it states that you're not to exceed that 2 dwelling units per acre. It's compatible with the adjacent subdivision to the north, Bella Terra, to the west, although Dave stated it's R3. It is R3, however, they are limited on their density to not exceed 2 dwelling units per acre, and that is right where they're at. They're at 2 dwelling units per acre. It's actually buffered from the adjacent subdivision to the west by, they will be required here to provide a buffer berm adjacent to Linder Road, and Homestead also has a buffer berm adjacent to Linder Road, which is a principal arterial. They're required to construct a 50-foot wide buffer adjacent to Floating Feather. It's a minor arterial, and then a 35-foot wide buffer area adjacent to Park, which is a collector. Comprehensive plan designation, neighborhood residential. It does have a transition overlay. They are showing with the design providing a transition to the adjacent property to the north. They're at 1.7 dwelling units per acre. Their minimum lot size is 10,000 square feet. Required by code is 17,000. In this case, they are providing the offsetting increase in open space. They're at 22.27 acres, which is 32.8%. And even with the offsetting increase of open space, I believe they are only required to provide 20%. And active open space, Councilmember Bond, you touched on this, they're at 60.8%. And the reason that's so high is because within the ponds, they're allowing for fishing, paddle boarding, or canoeing. And then with the other open common areas that are being provided, they have swimming, the gazebos, pickleball. And so those are all counted towards your active open space criteria. Zoning compatibility, it has proposed they're compatible with the comprehensive plan. I've covered the 2 to 4 dwelling units per acre, and they're at 1.7 dwelling units per acre, so they're below what's permitted. Let's touch on the setbacks really quick. Well, first of all, the required offset in open space has been met and exceeded in relationship to your setbacks. They're showing 2 separate setbacks. One's for living space, which is 30 feet, which is typically associated with your R2 zoning designation. However, Eagle City Code requires that your front of your garage, between the front of your garage and the back of your sidewalk, you have to have a minimum 25 feet. In this case, the sidewalk, the back of that sidewalk actually encroaches into the lot by 11 feet. Now, the way the setbacks are being proposed is 30 feet from living, which is typical, which is measured from the property line, and the garages have to be 25 feet from the back of sidewalk if they're a front-load garage. With that being said, we may get a building inspector out there that could add confusion. So if you'd like to provide clarification and do, measure setback just from property line, you could change the 25 feet from back of sidewalk to state 31 feet, strike back of sidewalk for a front load garage, and then that would allow for the 25 foot from the back of the sidewalk plus 11, because it encroaches 11 feet, so it would be 36 feet. And then I said 31, it should be 36. These areas highlighted here are what they're proposing to be served by the private street. In pursuant to Title IX in Eagle City Code on private streets, you can utilize private streets with a PUD as long as they don't exceed 10% of the lots within the site, or if approved by the council, if the council makes specific findings. In this case, what they're proposing is less than 10% of the site in its entirety. So as proposed, this is in conformance with the Eagle City Code, and they're not asking for a waiver of anything in regard to private streets. Parks and Pathway Commission recommendations, they addressed all the internal pathways and external pathways. As Dave touched on, there's a 10-foot wide pathway adjacent to Floating Feather and Linder, which was recommended by the Parks and Recreation Commission at their February 17th meeting. The berm height proposed along Linder Road is 7 feet. One of the conditions is that they meet the minimum requirement of 10 feet, whether it be with the berm itself or a combination of berm and masonry wall to get it to that 10-foot maximum height, or minimum height in this case, maximum is 12. They provided you with sample renderings. We do have sample renderings. The elevations will be part of the development agreement, be an exhibit to the development agreement, as well as there's a condition within the recommended development agreement that they have to form an architectural control committee, ACC committee, which prior to us issuing a building permit, they'll be required to provide the approvals from that architectural control committee. The Planning and Zoning Commission did recommend approval of this on May 16th, 2022, and some folks that were here that testified during the original hearing. There was actually a second hearing heard by the Planning and Zoning Commission. We held the first hearing. It was determined we had improper notice because we didn't notify to the 1,500 feet. So it was completely re-noticed, and they conducted a second public hearing prior to making this recommendation. All the conditions of development, if you want to talk about any of those specifically, I have those all out. And Councilmember Pike, when you made the motion on the last application, I actually had a slide set up with everything, and we could have typed that in, but I have one set up on this one as well, so that way, if you do choose to approve, we'll have a condition ready to go, or we can type them in as part of your recommendation. 3.13, if you want to adjust the front garage setback, it would be 3.13, and you can leave it as 25 feet from back of sidewalk, or if you want to keep consistent, measuring from the property line, staff would ask that you change that to 36 feet to the front of the garage. And with that, staff would stand for questions.
Any questions for staff?
Mr. Mayor? Mike, so if we do, if we add in CEP, would that be site condition number 20?
Correct.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, follow up. So Mike, I'll ask the developer, I totally forgot to ask about this one. There you go. Relative to the ponds and stuff like that, for active use ponds, I know that DEQ doesn't have any standards for testing or monitoring, anything like that. I'm assuming the city doesn't either. I've never been aware of any type of regulations we have for active use ponds for swimming, relative to monitoring for pathogens, microbes, and any of that fun stuff. Do we have anything like that?
And Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Bond, we do not.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? No? All right. Check the sign-up sheet here, and if there are those that didn't sign up that would like to speak. Thank you, sir. Okay, first up is Steve Bender. You can give your name and address for the record, please.
Steve Bender, 1235 North Seven Oaks Place in Eagle. I wanted to first address the setbacks. I understand what they were saying. I was assuming the sidewalks are part of the ACHD street. That makes a difference to me. I personally think they should keep both in there, the 30 feet from the property line and 25 feet from the sidewalk, because I checked. An F-250 is about 23 feet if it's got a nice big hitch on the back. What would bother me if I lived in that community is my neighbors parking their trucks on the sidewalk. And since the sidewalks are privately owned, I think that the flip side of that coin is that they have a right to park on the sidewalk if they want to, but it defeats the purpose of the sidewalk. I would hope that they will have in their CCRs some sort of a regulation that would prohibit parking your vehicles and blocking the sidewalk. Second issue is the side setbacks at 7.5 by 10. That's probably being done to squeeze in another house or two. It's 10 for a reason in a community that size, and I'd like to see the council keep that at 10. The rear setback at 25 instead of 30, I don't understand. That's a minimum, but is that 25 feet to the ponds for those houses that are around the lake? Where it would really bother me is if it's the 16 houses on the south side where it's neighbor to neighbor backing up to each other. If you're backing up to the fence and the perimeter of the development or to the pond, it's not as huge of an issue for me. But again, that's our rule, and we need to understand why we're granting that exception if you give it. The lot size minimum of 10,000 seems awful small to me. And they don't have a count of how many of those are falling that small that it puts them up to 50% lot coverage instead of 40. And then the last question I had, and I haven't heard answered, is on near the end of their application, they have a traffic circle in there at Linder and Floating Feather. And as an ACHD taxpayer, I'm really curious to know if the developer is going to put in that traffic circle, or if they just drew in what ACHD has planned in the future. If they're putting in the traffic circle, I might bend on some of the other stuff they want.
Okay. Any questions? Okay, thank you, sir.
I think that's everything on my list.
All right. Next on the list is Kurt Barber. Oh, okay. So you just signed up on the wrong one. Rebecca Van Camp. You can give your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, Rebecca Van Camp, 4719 West Braveheart Street in Eagle. And our home is directly to the north of the subdivision. And first, I'd like to thank you all for your time and also the developers of Farmstead, because it seems that we're very much on an amicable direction here and a path of talking about things. I just really wanted to mention some things so that they're on the record and are still there for consideration that we have been speaking about. First would be the transition to the north of our homes there on Braveheart. And so the south of our property is where they will transition in. And there is quite a difference in elevation of the land. So our homes kind of fall off a little bit. Right now it doesn't make a difference because there's a farm there. And we have to even put things in the fence because it is a wrought iron fence to hold our property in. Because the land is so much lower on the other side, we are talking with developers about meeting and making something that's cohesive for us that they would provide to make a good transition. We have our fence, for instance, slopes down probably at least 10 inches from our land to the back of our lot. And then you have another drop of at least 1.5 feet, if not more. So we're just asking that it's a record that they will be making the concessions to take care of those lot lines in the back and the fact that we do have those wrought iron fences that with erosion and gravity, the dirt would go. But we have spoken about that and we are going to meet. So I want to make that on the record. Second is the type of trees, and that was also brought up, that they do plan to put in the non-deciduous kind of trees, more like an evergreen, something like that. And we appreciate that concession because, again, we're trying to have the privacy and noise abatement, light abatement from this new subdivision. Third, I would ask, and we have briefly talked with them about this, that the homes that border the Braveheart area are south property and they're north, that those homes would be like for like, so single story matching single story, 2-story matching 2-story. Our home is the only one that actually has 2 properties backing up to it because we are in the corner near their northwest, very top. So we're going to literally have a fence coming in the middle of our fence and 2 homes on both sides. So it would be very important to us, and I know to a lot of our neighbors, that those of us living in single stories definitely don't want a gigantic 2-story behind us, and especially when we are going to have 2 of them facing us. So we have spoken about it, and I think that would be for consideration. But I want to make sure I mention it just again so it's on the record. And I very much appreciate the concessions that they've made from when we first started this process. So I think that's it.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilman Vaughn?
Ms. Van Camp? On that, relative to, you mentioned that you talked with the developer about that transition. I guess one of the big ones, did you guys talk about basically control of either water or runoff? Because that'll be a big one, because you're the responsible party on that one. So
yes,
have you guys addressed that?
We talked about it briefly tonight, and what we're hoping to do is that they will be able to bring the elevation up high enough and ours up high enough. And we spoke about them removing fences, like our own fence, because of that drop off. Certainly our water would end up in their property, and no one buying those homes is going to want it, much like we don't want it. So in the discussion, they say that they would make sure and take care of that issue, bring our current fence line up so that the water line is not rolling off and kind of create a little hump, a little barrier, but not leaving our yards going straight down into that. Because if they just bring the level up, we still have the same problem with the water runoff there. And right now, several of our neighbors actually have part of their landscaping coming down into the other property, into the farm. Because again, we've always been good neighbors. There's a big break between the plants and where our homes are, and there's a lot of weeds there. So it really has never been an issue before. But now that we're going to be neighbors, we need to make sure we're neighborly and that we take care of this so it doesn't become a problem later that we just missed in this process.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.
Let's see, Jerry Gibbs.
Good Good evening, Jerry Gibbs, 1834 North Monte Rosa Way, here in Eagle. I'm here tonight speaking for the residents of Bellaterra. We didn't want to bring 20 of them down here to keep you at midnight with all the comments, but we have been meeting with these residents and developing their concerns over all the development that's coming in around Bellaterra. I mean, Bellaterra is a beautiful place to live. It's quiet, it's peaceful, it's safe, and now we're being surrounded by new development, and it's created a lot of anxiety with the residents of Bellaterra. Change is the only thing constant, and the development's inevitable, and we understand that. And we want to be good neighbors, and we had the mayor out at our annual meeting in October, and he encouraged us to work with the developers, and we've been doing that. And it's really paid off. They return our calls, they do what they can do to listen and address our concerns, and I think it's going to, I've already seen it reduce the anxiety with the residents of Bellaterra. One of the big problems, you've heard it before, is the traffic. The conditions of development, Section 312, talks about the heavy traffic plan. We've been talking to this developer of Farmstead and also the other developers north of us at Soaring Feather about this. And you heard Dave talk about leaving the barrier up. The last thing we want is a rogue contractor with his D10 cat rumbling through our streets at 6 in the morning, riling up the neighborhood. Keeping that barrier up will mitigate that concern. I also appreciate their sensitivity to the bordering homes on light and noise abatement. They're going to, and you heard the concern about the elevation between the properties. The development team is going to be coming out, meeting with the affected neighbors, doing a walking tour, and I feel comfortable that they're going to address those concerns that those folks have. So you hear a lot of bad about developers. I talked to folks over at Lilac Springs and Eagle Mountain that had a lot of concerns, about the Stag Head development coming in and things like that, and they got very few concessions from the developer. That's not true for us. So I think it takes two to tango, and we've got a good dance partner here with the folks at Farmstead. Also want to thank the Planning and Zoning Department for answering our questions and helping us out along that. So, we look forward to being good neighbors. It's going to be a beautiful place. It's going to extenuate our home sales, our home values in Bellaterra. Just don't raise our taxes when you raise our property values. Thank you.
Just to make it clear, your assessed value has nothing to do with the taxes that you get charged, okay? Our budget does that, so we'll make sure we keep our budget
I talked to Mike Boyle. He said to bring that up.
Yeah, I'm sure he did. Tell him he's in Nampa now. Canyon County. All right, anybody have any questions? No? Okay. So everybody else that signed up said no at the time, but if they changed their mind, is there anybody else that would like to testify that didn't sign up? No? All right. Then if we can bring the developer back up and.
Guess I could leave that map up there. If you want another map, we'll switch over. Again, for the record, Dave Jorgensen, and here to respond to the comments that were made by staff as well as the public here. I saw one note about from Steve Bender, specific to the setbacks in the front, and staff also mentioned the comment about, do you want to change those setbacks? We propose what's actually the footnote in the city code. If you want to change it, either is fine with us, does not matter. If you want to leave it as we propose, that works for us. If you want to change that so it says that the front garage setback must be setback 36 from property line, it's apples and apples, it's the same thing. But if you leave it the same way, it serves us the same. There was a comment about adding notes in the CC&Rs. If you want to add that as a condition, that's fine, I guess, but that's pretty hard for the city to enforce. And that being, don't park your trucks with the tailgate hanging over the back end of the sidewalk. But if that's one of your desires for a condition, fine with us, but that's something we will want to enforce anyway. There was further discussion about concerns of why we're doing these side setbacks. Let me explain why. This vision is to present a plan with increased open space and increased amenities. This is not just a plain vanilla subdivision with reduced setbacks. We need the reduced side yard setbacks because that's actually not valuable real estate. We still have that's only for the first story, by the way. The second story still has the additional 5-foot setback, so it's only it's a single story that we're talking about. It's a slight reduction from 10 down to 7.5. Yes, that does make a difference to us, and that's why we've asked for it, but that's part of the PUD or a DA in lieu of a PUD process, is we are giving substantial open space, substantial amenities to compensate for that. And I really do think by the time we put all the landscaping there, you're not going to see the difference. What you are going to see is all the landscaping in the community. And so we need this, that's part of our request. Also the question that Steve asked about who's paying for the traffic circle, not us. That's a big ask for a development of this size. It's actually, all the impact fees are paying for this. We are paying impact fees. It's part of the capital improvements plan for this ACHD. City of Eagle helps set priority as to when it goes in. It's my understanding it's not that far away, maybe a few years away, a couple years away from doing the design work and the install fairly right behind that. But it'll be paid for by impact fees. Ms. Van Camp asked or talked about a couple things. I want to just acknowledge that we did have a conversation with her before, and we will have conversations with her after. We always try to work with our neighbors when there's a grading concern. In this case, there's a pretty big one. She showed us pictures before the meeting, and she's not the only residence. Hers might be one of the greater differences, but there's some that are more flat and some are some differences. But nonetheless, there's a 18 inches or so slope down, a pretty good quick drop off down below, of which some fill on our side would help mitigate that pretty quickly. But it's just not dropping it in there. We're going to walk the backyard with the neighbors to make sure that the grading is, one, not just filling in their backyard, but more importantly is we're making that transition nice and even for a nice finished look for our residents as well. Likewise with type of trees, we spoke to her before, we'll speak to her after to confirm, and all the residents along that north border to talk about if they care what the type of tree needs to go in to get that input.
Mr. Jorgensen, so do you know yet, because a lot of the stuff that's gone along Floating Feather needs a lot of fill as it is. Mm-hmm. Have you guys looked at that at all to see how much fill you're actually going to have to bring into that?
Mr. Mayor, the fill that we need primarily is for those big berms.
Okay.
That's why we need the big ponds to generate the material, frankly. I don't want to say that the whole mass grading has been designed for the project. When I look at the engineer, I know he's done a lot of it, right? He's done a lot of that work, and so we don't have construction plans to submit, obviously. That's after this meeting. But that's, the initial calculation was done to dig the big ponds so that we could have the material to be a net balance on the site. We don't want to have a whole lot of material imported. I'm going to look, do we have to import some? Probably some. Yeah, we do have to import some even with these ponds that we have. We will generate material when we put in the sewer lines and the trenches that go in. More material is generated when you do that construction. So it's a staging of how that fill goes in place. Likewise, we try to have, I'll call it a mass grading at one shot as best you can, so we're not inching our way into the neighbor's backyard and then more dust, more dust, more dust. We just want to try to minimize the impact as much as we can. So I hope that helps answer the question. It's not a simple answer, but those berms out front, especially Linder and Floating Feather, but Linder especially, there's a lot of material that goes in there.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask Dave?
Councilman Pike? Mm-hmm.
That's pretty much, I think, answer the questions. They have to answer
You had a
more.
question real quick.
That's all right, Dave.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dave.
Yeah.
I noticed that you just brought that up to me with the roundabout on Linder and Floating Feather, but I think ACHD's requesting one at Park and Floating Feather as well, and I don't see it in your rendering or your schematic for your drawing. I don't know if they got rid of that, but that was Park and Linder were both supposed to have a roundabout put in. So I don't know if you guys have looked into that or if that's part of your plan, because especially for the distance from the intersection and your open space there.
Mr. Mayor and Councilmember Pike, I'll give you two answers. First of all, I just asked Lauren, who's a traffic expert, so she can speak to all your questions probably, but
Good.
The roundabouts are different sizes too. Linder Road's not as big as Park Lane, so more real estates need to be preserved on the Linder intersection.
Linder's more.
Linder will be the bigger roundabout, the bigger corridor, so more right-of-ways need to be set aside on Linder than Park Lane.
Just I didn't see the schematic on it on that intersection there. I thought if you should probably have that.
And it'll be added to answer your question. It'll be set aside and preserved.
Yeah. Okay.
ACHD will make sure of that.
Yeah, I know. But just for people knowing that they do have a plan for roundabouts at both those intersections.
Yeah, I'm going to look to Lauren and see if she can answer it, then I'll be her translator here. But do you know, I think Linder is the one that goes in first and Park second.
Linder Road and Floating Feathers.
There you go.
Get up and give your name and address for the record.
Lauren Nuxel with Kittleson Associates, 101 South Capitol Boulevard, Suite 600 in Boise. Yes, Linder Road and Floating Feather is planned in ACHD's CIP for the year 2021 to about 2025. So that's going to be going through design and construction here soon. Park Lane will be, as you mentioned, a smaller roundabout. It will be a single lane roundabout planned in ACHD's CIP for 2031 to 2035. So that one hasn't been thought through design at this point yet, and so that will come up in a later date.
Okay, perfect answer. Thanks.
Okay. Mr. Mayor?
Yep. Councilman Bond.
Ms. Jorgensen, so one of the questions I asked Mike earlier, we don't have that. Relative to the ponds, this is one, as we see, we're seeing a lot more ponds, and the nice part is we're actually starting to incorporate active use rather than just they look there, they sit there, and nobody can use them. With that, though, do you guys have any internal standards you guys can use for monitoring for basically pathogens, fungus, algae, anything like that?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Bond, I don't want to stand up here and say I can speak to that. I'm not an expert on that, but we'll have a consultant to help with that. I've seen ponds, and I'm thinking of one right now that's at Linder Road, just south of the Highway 44. There's some apartments over there, and behind there, there's a 5-acre pond. Mm-hmm. And before those apartments were even built, it always had algae over the top of it in the end of the season. There was no aerators to it. It just kind of sat there. And I know aerators is a big part of making these ponds functional. The depth of them is also a big part of making them functional to try to help with the temperature turn. Mm-hmm. When you get down to the depth of it, then you have that water turn, and the cold actually turns to it helps circulate the top with the bottom as well. So I know our engineer will have to help with that. Dave Bailey, that's one of the reasons why we hired Bailey Engineering, is they're not a brand new firm in town. They're a pretty seasoned engineer in town, so we feel good about that resource too. Having said all that, we don't want to just say that's the only answer. We want to have regular monitoring to make sure that if there is a concern, that it can be identified for the residents. I would also add that's not any different than neighborhood pools. Nope. Neighborhood pools have problems too. Those are not governed by DEQ, as I understand. They're quasi-public, private. But nonetheless, that's something we try to implement with all of our communities, have people check for water quality in your community pools too.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, just quick follow-up on that. So yeah, the fungicide, basically all of those, the pond, when you guys do and if you guys can do, because this is as we get a lot more of these active ponds, where I know DEQ really doesn't do it, it's more the
Health District.
Health District usually deals with those. But I think we're gonna see a lot more of these because they're a fantastic amenity. So as you know, if you guys do come up with some standards, by all means, let us know so we can. That would be a nice one to actually start implementing as part of a required tool in there for monitoring and implementation.
Mr. Mayor and Councilmember Bond, happy to share our knowledge as we gather it for you.
All right, thank you.
You bet.
Any more questions for the applicant?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Ginsburg?
Yeah, Mr. Jorgensen. Rebecca had also had another comment as far as matching elevations to the north side. Did you have any feedback or thoughts on answering in that?
Mr. Mayor and Councilmember Ginsburger, we don't know exactly which house plans we're going to build yet, but we would take that in consideration for sure. If that's a requirement you want to impose, we never like that requirement, but we would accept that condition if that's what you're going to make us do. A lot of those homes there's a variety back in there. There's single-story and two-story back in there, so we'd have to make sure that we know which one is a single and which one's a two-story, so we're doing that alignment, but we would try to do that anyway. It's a long answer to your question.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? All right, then we'll go ahead and close the public hearing.
Thanks again.
Yep, and we're going to take a quick 5-minute break, and then we'll be right back. Back from recess. Thank you very much. All right, so if the council, what's your pleasure or discussion? Anything, anybody?
Actually, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilman Bond.
I'll just start with this for discussion. I'm going to say, make a motion to approve action item number.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry. According to the clerk, you did not close the public hearing.
Oh, I thought I said that after the end before I took the recess. But that's okay. We'll close it again.
You ran out of here real quick.
It's okay. Always better to do it twice than not at all. We'll close the public hearing. Okay.
Yep.
Councilman Bond.
Make a motion to approve action item 9B, A-12-21-RZ-18-21, and PP-19-21 Farmstead Land Subdivision, with adding site-specific condition number 20, CEP, for a condition of approval. And I'll leave it there for discussion.
Do you want to bring up the other site-specific conditions that you had on? Didn't you have a chart?
Those three? Should go with it.
Setbacks.
That's what I was-
3.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, so 20 that I did bring up, that covers Councilmember Bond's motion, and the only other one that I brought up was if you want to measure the setbacks consistently from the property line, you would change the front garage to 36 feet, or you can leave it as it is to measure the garage from the back of sidewalk.
Okay, you're going to leave it.
Just leave it as is. Yeah, I think you had 3 others, but I think that was for the last.
All right, is there a motion? Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Motion seconded. Any discussion?
Discussion, Mr. Mayor?
Yep, Councilman Ginsberger?
Mike, can you tell me if, can you reiterate for me if the elevations that are included in the record that was presented with the presentation, is that included in the conditions as well too? As also is the elevations, are they repeating of any kind? Do we have any kind of specifications on any of that?
And Mr. Mayor and Councilmember Ginselsberger, the elevations will be included as an exhibit. However, there is not a condition of development in regard to how many times you can use the same elevation within a certain radius.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Yep, Councilman Bond?
So, Council, or are you talking about the 3, the rule of 3 we've kind of been doing, which is you can't have the same elevation within 3 houses?
Mr. Mayor, yeah, Councilman Bond, not only that, but also to match the elevations to the north, as well as including the elevations that were shown within the presentation to be included.
Mr. Mayor?
Yep,
On that
Councilman Bond?
So, Mike, on that one, you already said that the elevations that were identified have been included, or do we need to include that as a condition of approval?
Mr. Mayor, with your permission, I'm going to exchange some questions, Q&A with the council. So I'm hearing 2 different issues here. First of all, is the elevations to the north matching, and I believe Councilmember Ginselsberger is referring to single-story versus 2-story. In that case, staff would recommend an additional condition of development 3.16 be added, which states the homes along the north subdivision boundary line shall be as shown on Exhibit E. And then when the development agreement comes back before you for approval by the council, we can put it on as a new business item. You can look at that and approve it, and they'll have to go out there and see what's single-story and 2-story and produce that exhibit for us. And that exhibit would be part of the development agreement when it comes back in front of the council. And then the second item, Councilmember Bond, you called it Rule of 3. We call it Rule of 5. We can add a condition of development that states that no similar home elevations shall be used within a radius of 5 homes from each other. And that would be 3.17, or we could just add it to the bottom of 3.13, which is associated with the setbacks.
Okay, I guess I'd like discussion on those 2. Personally, I can go either. I do like the fact that not having, I don't know about 5, because then that seems, but I hate same, but.
We usually don't see that in Eagle.
I've got a couple, actually. I've noticed that's, but that's definitely one I'd be in support of. That's one I wish I would have talked to the developer, or we needed to ask them first. But I'd be up for that one. And then the other one relative to, I think the only ones that we had discussions on were lots 38 through 41. Those are the ones in the northeast corner. Those were the lots that lined up with the smaller versus the bigger lots. The other ones that lined up perfectly, you want to keep those same as well? So the entire north, or just the northeast side lots, 38 through 41.
Mr. Mayor, yeah, I'm just looking to can have the contiguous flow between
Okay.
elevation, single-story backing. Just single-story to single-story.
Right.
Two-story to
That's what I
two-story.
Yeah, not lot line.
Not
No,
lot
not lot
lines,
line.
yeah.
No, Mike, can you go back to the map we had? Yeah, that works. So on this one, so I guess this is what I was asking. So we have either one, so this is lot 38 through 41 is the northeast corner, which is those are the smaller ones, the big ones, or the entire north.
The entire north.
Okay, that's I just want clarification on that one.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask the council for clarification in regard to similar elevations? Will change of color work for similar elevations, or do you just want the elevations have to change? The applicant asked if color difference would count towards that.
Mr. Mayor? I would probably say color does not count towards that. It's got to be different elevations. Different color doesn't work. I wouldn't mind doing a happy, rather than rule of 5, but rule of 3. I don't know, what are you guys' I'm up.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I'll give my 2 cents on that. I do live in a community that has similar elevations. They're similar, but they have the design on the front of the elevation has a couple of differences, and coloration is definitely one of them. But I also wish I would have had the luxury of a council asking for single family backing up against, or single story against single story, because I didn't have that luxury when our development was coming through with a different developer to the west of us. So if that does have something that creates more value and better good neighbor policy with it, I really don't care. I think it's the developer's prerogative to try to find a way to aesthetically make the neighborhood look beautiful and different. I wouldn't want, just for the sake of, if you were going on the northwest area there, if a row of the Terra View, Bellaterra, get them all messed up, Bellaterra, if they had 7 single stories in a row, and then somebody wanted to buy a lot there and have a 2-story on it, but we restricted that because we have 7. We have to make sure they're complying with the neighbors to the north. I don't know if I'd want to restrict it that much, but I see what you're saying. But yeah, it would have been nice when I was purchasing my home if we had that option too. So,
Mr. Mayor?
Yep. Councilman Gittlesworth?
Councilman Bond, in answer to your question, I lean more towards the preference of the rule of 5. I prefer that side.
Okay. Any more questions? I was going to ask one question, Mike. Not sure how we are going to control evergreen trees on the north on private property. Because the developer might put them in, but 3-4 years down the road, someone cuts them down and decides they don't want them there. So I'm not sure how we do that on private property. If it was a common space, I'd understand, but it's not.
And Mr. Mayor, that's a great question. It's not just 3 or 4 years down the road. It could be a year or 2 down the road. A new owner wants a swimming pool, and swimming pools do not get along with trees in the middle of the backyard. So I don't know how to answer that question based on the fact they could put it in their CC&Rs, great, and it's going to be up to them to monitor that. It would be, I would say, virtually impossible for the city to monitor it based on you're going to get continuously new homeowners or new residents, or you may have a single resident that just wants to change their landscaping in their backyard because they've seen something new.
Okay. All right.
Mr. Mayor?
You want to
Well,
do
yeah.
anything with your
Want to do that so quick, just to make out of this one. So if we're looking at doing the matched elevations, that would be 3.17 matched elevations. We'd look at all 18 lots.
Just match stories.
Correct, matched stories, but it would be the 18 lots on the northern boundary.
Correct.
Lots on the north.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to, because there's a couple of those that are, is it on the north boundary or is it on the west boundary?
Oh.
So we got the 2 in the corner that,
And it would also, what would be interesting is the other side are bigger, even bigger lots.
yeah.
So you might not do it on the east side. Only up against, you know what I'm, can you pull up the map that shows the subdivisions north? There was one that kind of showed.
back.
Well, that last one went
That's the
down.
one. Is that the one you're?
Yeah. So see those bigger,
Does that one work for you?
bigger lots to the north there, the ones on the east side? Maybe not have to match it up there because they're so much bigger, but just match them up against the other subdivision?
Mr. Mayor, my understanding was, I believe that that was the request of some of the neighbors that were on that eastern portion of and that was off of
This Ms. Van Camp lives right here.
The north or northeast?
the west end? Okay.
Yeah, the west
Oh.
side, yeah.
Mr. Mayor, I'm
Oh, we should point out the first time.
Yep.
she said this.
I just,
And either way, I think along the lines of matching them up to the best ability, on either one of those sides. I'm
Okay.
open to either one of those.
Mike, there's 169 lots in here, correct?
Correct, but 140 are buildable.
Oh, that's one, sorry. So 140, so we've got 18 of those, and of those, it would just have to match. So I think that's
so if I remember correctly, looking at the phases, phase one backs up to the existing subdivision and are all, can you pull up where you showed the phases? I think you had phases.
Phase one's off Floating Feather, isn't it?
Off the entrance.
Off Floating Feather.
Yeah. Oop. Okay, perfect. So I think, so everything in the north of phase one would match, house-wise, if you're gonna do it. But I wouldn't do it in phase two, or is it vice, yeah, or vice versa, okay.
you say they match.
So the people, what's the subdivision to the north again? Bellaterra, right? So they will match, that's where you'll match. But on the other side where you have the bigger lots, it can be single or two-story. It would only be matching on the.
So phase two.
Bellaterra, yeah.
Well, Mr. Mayor, then you could look at those corner lots on Linder, that big lot. You're gonna restrict that to a single-story home on that big lot on the curve.
We don't know, the one back up to it might be a two-story.
That's what I'm saying. If you're restricting it all the way across, that one would be included too. You're restricting a two-story from that.
No, you're matching it.
You're matching it,
You could have a two-story up in that top left.
if there's a two-story behind it.
Yeah, but only if, but I'm saying that big lot, say you wanted to buy that, but you wanted a two-story, but you're not gonna be able to buy that lot because there's a single-story
Right.
on Bellaterra.
Correct.
I'm not in favor of that.
Okay. What do you want to do with your motion?
So that one, so I've kind of heard two on that one. So I don't mind actually the rule of, I still like the rule of three. So relative to the exhibits, when we do that, just so we're clear on those, you can adjust this, it can be the exact same floor plan. They just have to adjust the elevation. Okay, I just want to make sure that we got that. So all it has to be is the elevation and color change.
Correct.
And that meets the intent of the exhibits.
Yes.
Okay. And then rule of five, and then the elevations, I kind of hear we've got both ways. So, Mr. Mayor, I'll amend my motion to add site condition number 3.16 to add the exhibits identified today and incorporate the rule of five using elevations within five have to be adjusted based on elevation and color. Either or not either or, but both.
Okay, does the second concur?
Mr. Mayor, I got to correct that. Color doesn't have to be in there.
Yeah, colors can't.
That's what, yeah.
We're talking single or two-story houses, basically. is what
Nope,
we're
different,
talking.
different. That's the other one.
Yeah.
That's why we're,
Yeah,
so this
that-
one is
that
just
was-
elevation.
That was, yeah. You're concerned with the one or two-story homes, backing up to one or two-story homes.
Well,
right?
we got to have a second and then we can discuss.
And that's not, okay.
So if you want to second it, then we'll second it and then
I wanna
discuss. or-
discuss the
For second,
first.
for discussion?
We can't continue.
No,
our
we're
discussion
supposed to
for the
go
first.
to a second and then discuss that if you agree. If you don't agree, then we can
I think
withdraw the motion or make an alternative motion.
All right, well, I feel like we jumped the gun on the second omitted, we were in discussion. I felt like we jumped the gun on putting a new motion out before we continued.
We didn't, he
full
amended
discussion.
his motion. We didn't put a
Yeah.
new one. He just
If you
amended.
don't second it, then it goes away.
So you have to concur the second or else it goes
Yeah.
away and then we can start discussion all over again. Or ask for someone else to second it.
So just don't, If you want to discuss more, just don't.
No, well, for discussion's sake, I'll agree to the amended motion.
All right, now let's go ahead and get back into it.
Okay, wow. Okay, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to continue with this then. I'm looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 homes on the north side of Phase 2 that we're saying the rule of 5, that none of those homes could be two-story. They all have to be single-story.
Mr.
Is
Mayor?
that what you were asking for?
No, Mr. Mayor, Councilman Pike, just that they match up from 1 story to 1 story, 2 story, 2 story to 2 story,
all
not
right.
the exterior elevation,
Okay,
just that.
all right, that's clear now.
Yeah.
Okay, that's why you totally had me confused there. All right, I get that, and I agree with that, okay.
Well, Mr. Mayor, that's not the amendment that I made, though. The motion I made had to do with the exhibits and then the actually what the houses look like, not the elevation.
Right.
So,
that
well,
was
sorry, the elevation, sorry, not 1 story versus 2 story, just the elevation, what the houses look like on the exterior.
Oh, I think her whole idea was.
No, that's what I said. I stopped there so we could discuss that one, and then I'll roll into that one because I think that's where we have the biggest. Yeah. Nobody agrees on necessarily the matching it the whole way, matching it halfway, not matching it at all. So I just wanted to start with the motion right now. The amendment is just the elevations have to, the rule of 5 with the elevations. That means they can't look the same.
Right, the elevations is, I agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
I think Councilwoman Gindelsberger's thing, her initial reasoning was single or 2-story homes backing up to the likeness of the other neighborhood. That's where I think we kind of got off a little bit.
So,
Mr.
Mr. Mayor,
Mayor?
I think that's our next step.
Yes.
Is what we'll
That's-
do
yes.
with, yeah. So, Councilman Vaughn, if you have any opinions on that, or you would like.
That's where I was saying, if you guys, I mean, I think you want the entire north, all north, they would match up, all 18 lots. And we probably need to name the actual lots. I know it's 38 through 41 on the east side, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on the east side, or on the west side. So you don't all, Councilman Pike, you said initially just half, or did you want it all as well?
Well, what I was looking at is Phase 1 has the larger lots, and I don't know what backs up against those lots. I do know the lot lines that they've shown on this drawing kind of match the neighborhood to the north. So all those property lot lines all match up. Now, whether they're single or 2-story, I don't know. But when we get over to Phase 1 with those bigger lots.
It's Phase 3, actually.
Phase 3's on our right.
I can't see that. Phase 3, okay. Yeah, the northeast corner, how about that? Phase 1's pond, northeast corner, large lots. I don't know what backs up to those. And I don't know if it looks like property lines are there, but they stagger, and there may not be as many. So I think the main concern was off that street, though, on the northwest area, right? Is that Phase 2 area? Is that what you were?
That's, yes, Phase 2. Mr. Mayor, I can, just, if I may, I could quickly go through
Councilmember
this and
Ginsburg?
just simply say east side, the west side, the Phase 2. I would be happy with that.
With that,
That'd be good. Okay. So with that,
Yeah, my only comment is I don't agree with making the match.
elevations match?
The north.
Of any of them?
Right.
Any lots? Okay.
Right. Just my opinion.
So with that one, I can see the ones on the, I hate doing that too. Because they're already matching the lot line, so I'll just keep the motion as is with the exhibits, just the rule of 5 and the pre-motion, and we can go and see if, I don't necessarily think the elevations need, or the stories need to match up.
Okay. And the second can already concurred with that, so
Yep.
we should be good. So any more discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Hold on.
Oh, yep.
Mr. Mayor, just clarification, you asked, I believe in 3.16 that the elevation, not the elevations, excuse me, the architecture.
Elevations were a guy.
Yeah,
I was trying to.
there's single-family architectures are already addressed in 3.9. If you're worried about what they showed tonight, what was shown tonight, will be incorporated under 3.9 as an exhibit.
Okay, that's fine.
Any more discussion? All right.
Did you?
Sorry. Public comments closed, sorry.
Closed.
So-
Mike, did you have any?
And Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Tracy, I think you and I are in the same spot right now. So,
Want me to redo it?
yes, please.
Okay. So I already made the motion. So the initial motion was approval with the addition of site-specific condition number 20. Then the addition of site. You want me to read the whole thing again? Okay, I'll start from scratch. Make the approval to approve action item 9B A-12-21/RZ-18-21 and PP-19-21 with the addition of site-specific condition number 20, CEP, condition of approval, and site-specific condition 3.16, the elevations identified in report, but they're already in 3.19, and incorporation of the rule of 5 with the elevations being able to change, or changed elevations within 5.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
I think I understood that one. I'll
Okay.
second it.
Moved and seconded. Any more discussion?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilmember Gunners.
Just want to discuss that. I like this project. I think it's a great idea, great addition to Eagle. I do not agree with the not matching of the stories on the backside, and that is all I will say.
Okay. Anything else? All right. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries. Okay, now we move on to item 10A, new business, action item ordinance 877, rezone from MU-DA mixed use with a development agreement to R9-DA residential with a development agreement, Kingfisher Cove.
All right, Mr. Mayor, I move pursuant to Idaho Code 50-902 that the rule requiring ordinances to be read 3 different days with 1 reading to be in full be dispensed with, and that the ordinance number, where are we at? 877 be considered after being read once by title only.
All right, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
All right, Mr. Mayor, then I move that ordinance number 877, the rezone from MU-DA mixed use with a development agreement to R-9-DA residential with a development agreement, Kingfisher Cove Townhouse subdivision, an ordinance changing the zoning classification to the real property described herein from MU-DA mixed use with a development agreement to R-9-DA residential with a development agreement, amending the zoning map of the City of Eagle to reflect this said change, providing this severability clause, and providing an effective date. The 10.68 acre site is generally located in the northeast corner of West State Street and State Highway 44.
All right, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any more discussion? Roll call.
Aye.
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 Item 10B, action item ordinance 878.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Bond.
Jesus, everybody's forgetting my name right now. I move pursuant to Idaho Code 50-902 that the rule requiring ordinances to be read on 3 different days with 1 reading to be in full be dispensed with, and that ordinance number 878 be considered after being read once by title only.
All right, there's a motion. Is there a second? Second. Moved and seconded. Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Bond.
Make a motion to approve action item 10B, ordinance 878, rezoned from R4 residential to R6-DA residential with a development agreement, an ordinance changing the zoning classification of the real property described herein from R4 residential to R6-DA residential with development agreement, amending the zoning map of the City of Eagle to reflect said change, providing a severability clause, and providing an effective date.
All right, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call.
Aye.
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 All right, item 11, public comment 2. This time is reserved for the public to address their elected officials regarding concerns or comments they would like to provide to the city council regarding any matter, up to and including any subject on the agenda, with the exception of public hearing and land use items. Comments regarding public hearing and land use items need to be made during an open public hearing for said items in accordance with Idaho Code. At times, the city council may seek comments, opinions regarding specific city matters, excluding public hearing and land use items during this allotted time. Out of courtesy for all those who wish to speak, the city council requests each speaker limit their comments to 3 minutes. Is there anybody who would like to make public comment too? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to executive session.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Vaughn.
Make a motion to go into executive session pursuant to section 74-206, associated with the acquisition or interest in real property which is not owned by the public agency, and to communicate with legal counsel for a public agency to discuss legal ramifications of legal oppositions or pending litigation.
All right, is there a motion or is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded, roll call.
Aye.
Aye.
On Sunday.
All right, we're out of executive session. Any motions? Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Someday.
One of these days, I'm going to go roll call.